So I'm going to turn it over to our distinguished media panel. I mean, I see the two Chris's up here in suits, and so that's a picture in and of itself. Chris Norris and Chris Wink. But many of you often ask, how can we develop relationships with the media? How can we get the word out about the work that we're doing? What are inexpensive ways that we can share the work that we're doing? And so that's why we've assembled this panel of experts to share some tips with you. Again, there'll be opportunity for you to ask them questions. And our moderator today is Neil Budde from Access Philly. So I'm going to turn it over to Neil.
Thank you very much, Donna. Can everyone hear me? We have some microphones out here. I can make sure that good. I get a thumbs up in the back of the room. Thank you. As Donna said, my name is Neil Budde. I'm the CEO of Access Philly, which is a nonprofit news organization. We launched as a website in late January, so we've been up and running almost 5 months, but I've been in town about 16 months trying to get this off the ground. Our initial funding came through a grant from the William Penn Foundation, and that money is still sustaining us for a while longer. It's interesting that the panel, as we were talking and preparing, we found that while we were brought in primarily for expertise in media, either as media organizations or media relations organizations, there's also a lot of crossover between media and nonprofit. So I sort of fit in both categories as a news organization that is covering public interest issues in the city, but also as a nonprofit that will, going forward, be looking for media attention and as well as fundraising. So this is an interesting meeting for me. A little bit more about Access Philly. Our focus is around public interest issues. Part of what we try to do is take a small number of issues and stay with them over a period of time and keep bringing new information to light. One of our areas of specialization is in data journalism, so we do a lot of work around large data sets, helping to make those more accessible to the public, make them easier to visualize and understand information in data sets and turn that into reported stories. So if you're involved in something that might have lots of data that we could help with, and then that might be a good avenue to get your story out as well. The other area that we focus on pretty heavily is public engagement. So trying to really not just put information out, but have it out in a way that it invites people to participate, both through online discussions, but also in some cases we are doing projects where we involve in-person group meetings. We have a project right now called Schoolhouse Watch, which is focused on the school buildings that are closing and what's going to happen to those. And we've already had 3 community forums to bring people together to talk about what's next for some of these buildings. So I won't continue much more with me. What I'm going to ask each of the panelists is just quickly to give their own introduction with a focus on how their expertise kind of brings to bear on the issue of how you can help get better media relations and better publicity. So start with Chris, and we'll just go down the row.
Hello, my name is Chris Wink. I'm one of the co-founders of Technically Philly. We're an early-stage technology news site. We also operate in Baltimore. We publish in Baltimore, and we just did our first hire in Brooklyn. So we'll be in 3 cities, and we organize events primarily, including here in Philadelphia, Philly Tech Week. And I, like my entrepreneurial community, rarely dress nicely. There are 2 people for whom I wear suits, my girlfriend and Donna Frisbee Greenwood. And so that is why I'm in my rather preposterous but always lovely zoot suit.
Hi, I'm Megan Wendell. I'm the founder and president of Canary Promotion. We were founded in 2001, and we provide communication services for specifically for arts, culture, and mission-driven clients. As Knight Grantees, most of you have probably either heard from me or someone in my office as we've worked on communications for the Knight Arts Challenge over the last 3 years. I also have a background as a musician. I studied at Berklee College of Music and am a singer and have done a little acting, but singing is really my passion. And I also play guitar and piano, so I have an arts background as well.
My name is Loraine Ballard-Morril. I'm the Director of News and Community Affairs for Clear Channel Media and Entertainment. That's 6 radio stations, Power 99, WDAS, Smooth Jazz, new one, Radio 104.5, Mix 106.1, and I'm missing one. Oh, yes, Q102. Thank you, Donna. Anyway, what I do is I do all kinds of public affairs and community events, and I'm the news director, but I have kind of two sides, because not only do I do the news and gather news, but I'm also trying to pitch at the same time, because I'm also the media relations point of contact for all the Clear Channel stations. So I can kind of speak about things from both sides. And one thing that few people know about me is that I started out as a dance major.
Good morning. My name is Chris Norris, CEO of Techbook Online Corporation. We're an integrated internet, multimedia publishing, and sustainable marketing and news organization. We're headquartered in Philadelphia. We're one of the largest and most active publishers on PhillyInFocus.com. Much like the Knight Foundation, we believe communities are best when they're engaged and informed. So our mission as a company is to produce socially relevant content that engages, informs, empowers, and educates communities. From art side, I'm a professional drummer and currently raising the awareness of the health benefits of drumming.
Right.
Chris and I spent a lot of time at the last session we were together discussing that. I'm going to throw out a question that I think could be answered by any or all of us. One of the things that's happening in the media world is there's a lot more fragmentation. Some of the larger news organizations have been shrinking as the economic challenges have faced them with the internet, but lots of smaller organizations have been growing, but some of the smaller organizations don't reach as widely as the larger ones. Think a little bit about sort of how that fragmentation affects the challenge, particularly for nonprofits to get their message out. Should they, be as focused on the larger organizations? Should they be trying to, to extend their reach across a wide range? What would you recommend? And I'm going to start at that end of the table with Chris.
That's a good question. What I've noticed in the last 2 years is that there's a concentration of ownership, so that there's a limitation of content sources and where you can get your message out. And what's not on the forefront of most people's mind when they're creating an organizational structure is in some case having your own media and your own kind of press corps developed internally, right? To kind of develop these kind of hyper-local stories or kind of hyper-local context within your brand. In Philadelphia particularly, there's these larger media outlets that cover the public interest, the politics, the government, and it doesn't necessarily give way to more niche stuff like art and the intersection of art and technology. So I would recommend that you create the relationships with the larger media organizations, but that you really focus in on creating and collaborating with the people in this room and kind of creating and offspinning new news organizations that can support the work that's being grown. There's a new industry that's growing, but there is an immediate climate that's growing with it.
I would totally agree with you, Chris, because I think that I represent one of the largest, if actually it is the largest radio group in the entire world. And we're huge, but fortunately, right here in Philadelphia, I have the luxury of kind of being grandfathered in. The things that I've done, I've worked in this market for 30 years, and so they kind of leave me alone, and which has been a blessing, because I can do a lot of things with the arts. I can do a lot of things with nonprofits, and I do. So I think that what I would recommend is two things. One is what Chris said, is kind of develop your own media, because these days, you basically can be your own producers. I mean, I've actually started creating my own YouTube channel, just starting to do that on my own. Anyone with an iPhone can create media. There's all kinds of ways that you can do that on your own and get the word out and start connecting with your own community internally to kind of communicate within you. And then you never know, some of that stuff can blossom into something even larger. The other side of it, from the conventional media that I represent, is it's all about relationships. I mean, I know Chris, and when Chris calls, I will respond. Donna, she just says hi, and I say yes. And that's really true for a lot of nonprofit organizations. But the key is becoming related and connecting. And one of the ways to do that is to be at events like this and find other events. There are a number of different organizations like the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, the Black Public Relations Society, that have events. Look for those events, be at those events, and meet people. You will find that in the end, we are constantly confronted with a tremendous amount of noise. There's so much coming at us, and as we all know, it's fewer people doing more things. And so we have to triage. We have to figure out what are we going to pay attention to and what are we not? And we're human beings more than anything else. And so in the end, what we're probably going to do is we will try to work with the people that we know, the people that we always want to find new people, and we always try to do that, but we will tend to gravitate towards people who do somehow reach us one way or the other, whether I met you. Someone Facebooked me the other day and had a play about bullying. And so I said, oh, great. And next thing you know, she's in my studio, did the interview, it's going to air next week. So you want to figure out different ways that you can connect with the decision makers. Find out who those are, too. Because if you reach out to the wrong person, then it's just a waste of time. If you send out a blanket news release to someone who's in the business department, then nothing's going to come of it. But find out who those key people are in those organizations and figure out different ways to really connect.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's something that advice that we give everyone we talk to is, do your research and know, when you do your marketing and your community outreach, you have to know your audience, and it's the same for media relations. You have to know your press contacts, and you have to get, you want them to get to know your work and write about your work. You have to do the same. You have to get to know their work and understand what kind of stories they're covering, what they're interested in. Obviously, journalists are all over social media. You just gave a great example. Sometimes if I don't get a response to an email, I might tweet someone and get a response faster because everybody wants to see what their @ and DMs are. So, and I think you can't follow everybody all the time. You can't monitor everyone all the time. But, on Twitter, for example, you can create some lists of maybe 10 journalists that you really want to connect with over the next few months and follow them closely, watch them, see what they're tweeting about, see what they're covering, and then interact with them in a way that shows that you, are paying attention to their work so that they will then pay attention to your work. I even confirmed coverage for a story on Pinterest a few weeks ago. I pinned an image from a project we were working on, and an arts writer saw that and commented on the image and confirmed that they were covering the exhibition. So you never know where those connections are going to take place. I think also speaking to content development, the changing media landscape is a challenge for all of us. The days of, if you're a theater company and you had 4 shows in a season, if you were established, you were going to get a feature and or a review for every one of those shows, and that's not the case anymore. Most of especially print, like at the Inquirer, they're working with all freelancers now. Their freelance budgets keep getting cut and cut. So you have to really think strategically about when you're going to pitch stories and what you're going to pitch. You can't necessarily pitch everything going on in a year of programming. You've got to look at where the bigger stories are, and also tie into some trends. But sorry, that was a segue. But in talking about content development, I think you have to internally create a system and an editorial calendar within your organization. And really look at what the workflow is going to be across, whether that's going to be dedicated to one person or across departments, and, just make that part of your workflow. And a lot of organizations don't have the resources to dedicate one person to content development and social media work. So if you can't do that, you need to take a look at how many hours in a week can we dedicate to this, and who's going to lead that, and where's the content going to come from, and just create a workflow for that.
I wouldn't want to duplicate.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to duplicate too much, but to underscore what I feel like the theme is, and it will be recognizable to everyone, is I always want to know why you want to be covered. I think there's this sense that I need a plaque in my lobby, so I need to get a newspaper feature, or I need it for my reel for fundraisers, so I need to get on TV. And maybe those are valuable things, but I'm so interested that our industry, the news industry, is freaking out as we realize that 350,000 print subscribers 20 years ago may have been much more interested in the coupons and the comics than reading those arts features. So we start looking at the numbers and are able to do so, the value add we can provide as an industry is there, but increasingly through your email marketing list, through your social media channels, large enough arts organizations can rival what traditional news can offer you. So if I was in a lot of your organization's shoes, I would want a very cogent idea of why I want whatever publication to highlight me and what is the return that I expect. More butts and seats, more donors to come through, more volunteers, whatever it is. And I wonder if that can happen. And I think when you find the right news organization, you can. But I think we're often surprised by how often we can't. And your effort could be put in a lot of other ways. Sometimes I think getting 100 donors on an email list that you can directly access and access smartly is a lot more valuable than a news hit. That said, I think the flourishing world of independent media that cycles up through legacy is a great pipeline for attention that can put butts in the seats and donors in the cards. So look through the value you can get out of an organization and know why you want to be covered is probably the biggest point that I think hits home.
So Chris, you raised a good question of why do you want to be covered, but I think part of it's also, what is the story? How are you different? And what are good ways that people would suggest as folks go out to make their pitch, to present themselves, to make it as clear as possible that they are different than this organization or this organization and worthy of a separate story on them alone. And I'm going to start with Loraine on that one.
Oh, well. Thanks, Chris. All right, so what constitutes a story that I would want to use? There are a lot of factors that have no relationship with the value of the content. And this brings me to the issue of delivery. There are a couple things I just want to kind of present to you. When I get a news release and it has a 10 megabyte attachment on it, I'm going to delete that. And that's simply out of practicality because I get 500 emails a day and you have this fantastic flyer that you've spent so much time on, but I'm not going to see it because it has completely overloaded my inbox. So those are some simple things just to keep in mind. It's just, gosh, how do you punch through? I mean, you also have to look at the medium that you're approaching. So for instance, if you have something very visual, you have to ask yourself, well, is that going to work for radio? Or if it does work, like for instance, First Person Arts is in here, I think. Oh, way over there. Now that's a prime example of a story that's just designed for radio because it's all about storytelling. Maybe Mural Arts. I will still do that story, but it's, again, a very visual story, and maybe that's something that you want to pitch to a web outlet or a print or something or TV or something that's going to allow you to present it so you can see it. But I have to moderate that by saying that these days, what we are is we're more than just radio now. We've changed our name. We're not Clear Channel Media. We're not Clear Channel Radio anymore. We're Clear Channel Media and Entertainment. So we actually do have the opportunity to put pictures up on our website or to get video and that sort of thing. But I do want to just mention those little things that can totally, sort of bomb your idea. And number one is constantly blasting me with the same. First of all, know who you're reaching. If I get 5 emails from the same person, almost out of irritation, I will, delete all of them. Just be very careful in how you present your information. Give it to us in plenty of time. Know what our news cycle is. For me, if I'm doing a public affairs program, I need at least 1 or 2 weeks' notice if it's going to air, say, on a Sunday. Different news outlets have different deadlines. Newspapers have different deadlines. TV has different deadlines. You want to have something, before the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news. Or if it's a weekly, you want to make sure it's before their Tuesday deadline. So you want to also be cognizant. One of the most irritating thing we get is getting a news release that says their event is happening tomorrow, and there's just no way we're going to be able to do anything for you. So I can't always answer the question of what I will cover, but I can answer the question of what I won't cover. And those are some of the reasons why I don't cover certain things.
I mean, I think, you know, it's about creative storytelling, effective storytelling. I was just at the Americans for the Arts annual convention in Pittsburgh, and that was a huge theme. You know, how do we tell the stories of the arts? And we, you know, as a community, have all of these vibrant stories, but I think sometimes organizations struggle with how to make them resonate and how to make them have impact. You know, for example, a lot of organizations tend to celebrate anniversary milestones, you know, 10 years, 25 years. And that's fantastic that you're celebrating 25 years, but it's not a story. The story is the people who tell the story of your organization, the volunteer who's been volunteering with you for 10 years, or the student who worked in an education program who has now come back to teach a workshop. Those individual people, hone in on those people who've been your champions and who really tell the bigger picture of your organization. I think that that's something that I personally have seen organizations struggle with, and that, you know, we work with organizations to try to flesh out and say, okay, what's the story that's really going to speak to the audience and have an impact, and still tell the larger mission of your organization and your work.
As I was thinking about this, we were very fortunate this week and got a fairly long piece in Flying Kite Media about Access Philly. And what was interesting about it, and I'll pose the question to the panel and I'll finish the story, is to think about some example of something that was sort of an unconventional way in which somebody got coverage, or that a little out of the sort of normal, so not just sort of pitching directly. And what was unusual for us about this is that even though I had pretty good relationships with some of the top people at Flying Kite Media, I never really said, why don't you do a story about us? What happened is one of our staff, people on our staff, had a good friend who was a freelance reporter who did a fair amount of work for them. And she pitched it to her friend, the reporter. And so to me, it sort of highlighted an unconventional way in which you can make a connection. It doesn't always have to come at the top. It doesn't always have to come in. Sometimes it's other people. You should make sure that everybody in your organization, if you're more than a single person organization, is aware of the story you're trying to get out there, and is pushing it out to their friends, because sometimes you can make a connection, do something like that. So I'd ask some of the panelists, and I'll let whoever is ready with an idea jump in first. Do you have other ideas of kind of unconventional or different ways to think about getting into a news organization?
I would say always be closing, especially when you're talking to a news organization or a reporter, even if it's not a direct pitch. In your conversation, always be closing. The greatest success I've had in that is talking to George Miller, who's the publisher of Jump Philly magazine. We were at an event, and we were having a conversation. And I knew that I wanted to be in Jump Philly magazine, but I didn't want to do a pitch. So I knew, I found my unique value proposition, right, and what my narrative was supposed to be, and then I just had a conversation. And then you get that spark, that interest. It's like, oh, I've never heard that narrative before. Why don't we, do the story? And it was about, the health benefits of drumming, or what that does for your heart to what it does for your brain. And it went from that conversation to actually doing a whole story on the spring issue and having, a story and a concrete article with actual thought leadership from sports psychologists. So it actually gave that narrative some legs to go on to the next step of storytelling. So that's a quick example of something that I've done.
Great.
I mean, I think it's not new, but it's what we're seeing is new. It's so much relationship driven. Anytime Megan emails me, I open that email. Sometimes she has to tweet me and remind me, but I open every email she sends, and
Thanks, Chris.
that, of course, and that carries over to what Chris is saying, in the sense that you develop relationships. As Megan said, you create a Twitter list, whatever mechanism does that vehicle for creating a relationship with whomever is relevant to you. I think that has always been the case, but it's paramount now when we're in an age, as Neil mentioned, that media is fragmented so much, right? Like, Chris, it's valuable to get in Jump Philly, which is probably like a 10,000 circulation music mag. That's not huge numbers, but it's incredibly relevant to someone who Chris wants to know about him. So the idea that, like the rise of the mommy blogger is like 10 years old now. That's like a 10-year-old story, but the power of someone with an incredibly trained, focused audience that is small in numbers, but the exact audience you're interested in is incredibly powerful. And a lot of that can cycle up. So I think relationships with whomever makes most sense to who can tell or convey the message you want for the action you want to outcome. I think that's the driving factor. Maybe another slightly unusual but related way I find stories grow is the idea that it's not just traditional news media who are playing this relationship game. I think one of my favorite publishers is the Pew Charitable Trust. That is not a traditional news organization, but the Philadelphia Research Initiative, so there's some of the best reporting in the city. They have an outpost of former Enquirer reporters who are over there. They do a monthly email that I think is one of my favorite emails I get. It curates trends in city development and issues that relate to them. And we've followed ideas they've shared in that email that have been piped up into Legacy or elsewhere. And so that is, if you have a story that's relevant to a foundation or to a nonprofit or to another organization or someone else sitting here, the story is not just direct to media, but if we're in a world where everyone is publisher, buzz phrase warning, then the reality is that is an entirely new pipeline into media. And I think that's where you have to start picturing everyone here probably has a different audience that might overlap with whoever you want to hear from. So maybe someone you're sitting next to has a 120-person email list that may sound meaningless to you, but it may have 15 of the people you most want to know about your organization. And that 120-person email list may be way more valuable than getting in a 30,000 unique monthly website or 120,000 circulation paper.
Loraine or Megan?
Well, I guess the only thing I can add to that is that there are the major news organizations, and I'm talking about Clear Channel, I'm talking about all the TV stations, I'm talking about Philly.com. They all now have digital components, and they're looking for content. Right now, one of the biggest challenges for large organizations is finding content. And we talk about how we're basically 6 brands creating content. And so we're looking for content in all different types of ways. For the most part, it's entertainment related, but now more and more we're pulling out this content from a community standpoint, to the extent that we actually, at least from our company's standpoint, and actually locally, we're trying to be the forefront of this. We're creating a whole community area within all of our websites. In fact, just a pitch. We are doing a nonprofit of the week, and I can tell you more about that later, but we're highlighting a nonprofit every single week, 52 weeks in the year, and what we do is once we highlight that organization, we tweet it out to every radio station has something like 50 to 90,000 Twitter followers or Facebook followers. So we put it on our website, we tweet it out, and that's one avenue. We have a community calendar. A lot of times people will ask, well, can we get a public service announcement on the radio? Sometimes we can do it and sometimes we can't, but we always have the opportunity you can create an element on our community calendar. So I think more and more we're trying to find different ways to interact with the community and to support the community. And at least I can speak from our standpoint, that's one way that we're trying to approach it.
We covered the ground, or do you have anything to add, Megan?
I think some of you may have heard me say this before, because I think some of you were probably at the panel that we did at WHYY on media, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but I think speaking to what you're saying, everybody's talking about content development, and it is so important because you can reach your audience directly with the content presented in exactly the way that you want. But it's also about working with traditional media. Like you said, radio has a web component. WHYY has Newsworks, and they're doing great local coverage there, and they want audio, video, photos. But knowing how to translate one piece of the content originates from somewhere, and knowing how to translate that content across platforms, whether it becomes a tweet or a Facebook post or a blog post or something you share in your email newsletter or something that you can hand over to a member of the press. It sounds like, oh my God, how are we going to have time to create all this? But if you identify some core pieces of content that come from your programming, that can be translated across a variety of platforms and be useful, in 12 different places. So I just want to put that out there because it sounds a little overwhelming after a while. How are we going to create all this content? And I mean, I have a small company, we have a small staff, so we face the same kinds of issues, and we are also creating content about our work, about our clients. And we're actually now a contributor on a new Philly.com blog, so, it all comes full circle.
Okay. We've touched a little bit on various aspects of social media. Want to throw out one more question just to sort of touch on that, is some ideas of good things that you've seen people do in social media that helped get them attention. I know one thing that we've tried to do is anytime we're tweeting, we tweet out a lot of stories that we see, from other news organizations. And one of the things we started to realize that we get more attention if we make sure we include in the tweet the handle of the writer, not the organization. So, because the writers are all sitting there looking at who's mentioning them on Twitter, and they're all saying, oh, who's this and who is that? And then they start to pick up on some of the people. So getting, not just tweeting about yourself, but tweeting about other things going on in the community, and then, or particularly tweeting stories that you see that are sort of in your area of expertise that others are writing, but sort of get your name out there by tweeting, and the reporter sees that you've tweeted their stuff.
Oh yeah, that's so effective, because I was tweeting something out yesterday, and somebody, I was at a conference on incarceration, and he must have tweeted like 5 tweet posts, and he included my name on each one of them, and it was Philadelphia Fight, and it was all this other stuff, and I go, who is this guy? And so of course I retweeted some of his tweets that he did about what I was doing, and then he said, I want to get in touch with you, and I said, great, and I direct messaged him, and we're going to connect. So that is a very effective way of getting our attention, is if you're at an event that we're at, and you tweet about it, and then you include our Twitter on there, or if you find that there's something that you liked that we tweeted, and then you retweet it or quote tweet it or whatever you do, and then we get a little ego boost, quite honestly, from seeing that, and so that's going to make us want to at least pay attention to you and oftentimes respond back to you.
Any other examples of things that you've seen done with using social media that helped get your message out?
Social media to me it's this open canvas, and so everyone's talking about curating content, and everyone can curate content. Philly in Focus is a perfect example of a media platform that everyone can take advantage of in this room to begin storytelling. But when you have Twitter and you have Facebook, these become free distribution tools for the social media content that you create. And so it's, using that as part of your strategy when you're creating Twitter, that's a distribution service for whatever blog you write, whatever content you post, you're able to now distribute that on the same level platform that any other news organization is doing that. And so just looking at the social media as that open canvas, as a distribution platform, and realizing that you're all playing now on the same field when you're using social media, that you're using the same the platform that Lorraine's using to reach her 90,000, people that you're using to reach her 900. And so there's that room to grow, and it's in scale when you're using that.
Don't suck. Go to whatever social channel you feel is most powerful for you, and would you want to hang out with you at a bar with whatever you're sharing? And I think that includes engagement. I think that includes sharing stuff, as Neil said, that goes beyond what you're doing. I don't want to hang out with you at a bar if all you talk about is your stupid organization. I sometimes want to hear about it, but I want to be engaged more broadly. So I think that is we are human beings, and social is another tool or vehicle to message, but we are still fundamentally connecting as we always should have. So I think that is the truest test. And so any social strategy, I tend to feel like mirrors what happens in real life. If you're engaging, if you say something that's amusing, if you offer information that extends beyond you, if you interact, if you acknowledge another person in the room instead of just those you normally circulate, those all mirror human interaction. So I think that for me is the test case for how you can succeed on social.
Yeah, I think the interaction is so key, and it's a mistake that I see a lot of organizations make. Don't ask people to contribute to your community on social media and then not acknowledge it. I see that so often. You know, there would be some sort of, you know, promotion or a contest, or maybe, you know, you walk in the door of an event and you get the hashtag. Everybody should use the hashtag today. You know, like you get the hashtag, or you say, oh, please post your photos on our Facebook wall or whatever it is. And, you know, tag us on Instagram, and people do it. And then it's like silence, you know? I mean, if I'm engaged with your brand enough to basically help promote what you're doing and, you know, post a picture of my kid at, you know, having fun at your museum or whatever the case may be, acknowledge it. Whether it takes so little time, and I feel like that is a big problem. And what that does, the acknowledgement and then the building of the interaction, creates this community, and that brings you more attention, and that brings more people to you.
I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. Before you state your question, please identify yourself. So we'll start. I see a hand right here.
Hi, my name is Aisha Richardson. I'm here representing ex-offenders for community empowerment. I had a question about the best media tools to use to create your own media. Can you give us some examples of some tools that are most effective or least effective, or emerging tools as well?
What do you want to have happen? What do you want to do?
I want to integrate everything that the organization does with YouTube, with social media, and traditional websites.
Why?
I think part of the reason is to be able to tell the story of the organization, to be able to do outreach to folks who don't know about the organization, to be able to engage people, to be able to participate in the services that the organization provides. I think that it is that media is a way to be able to provide service.
So you want a group of people to do a thing. So I would start by saying, where do those people hang out? If those people, whomever, you know, donors, clients, whatever they do, and I don't know, but if they're active on Facebook, then you use Facebook. If they are heavy content readers, I mean, you could use another strategy. I think there are no shortage of tools, and every half-finished web startup of the day is trying to create a new one for you. I think there's no shortage of them. I think for me, the step one is who is the audience you want to reach, and where are they? Rather than creating everything and then trying to track that audience. If you have a huge, I mean, Instagram in like the 18 to 24 demographic is exploding, right? They went from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, back to Twitter, and now over to Instagram. And so maybe an Instagram strategy is exactly what you should be doing if it hits the demographic you want. Maybe it shouldn't be. So I think for me, it's totally step one of where's the demo you want to hit. Because I want 18 to 24 to know about our programs, or I want 45 to 50 wealthy Philadelphians to donate, or I want 5 new board members, and I think that's for me where I would start. And it may not be specific enough, but I feel like it's challenging to do before that, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can also, you know, the kind of statistics that Chris is throwing out, I mean, you know, those are readily available, but they change all the time. So you do have to keep an eye on what those statistics are. But you can also look at things like your website analytics, and how are people coming to your site? Where are they coming from? You know, you might find out that, you know, maybe like say you're using Facebook and Twitter, and you're surprised to find out that actually more people are clicking through to your website through Twitter. So maybe you should put more of your attention there. You know, I just posted a blog on our website today that actually used 3 different tools. In addition to the blog post, I embedded a couple of Vine videos and a Flickr slideshow and a photo that I took on Instagram. You know, and I did that all on my phone as I was experiencing the event that I was reporting on. So, you can use different platforms to make the content more rich, you know, but I think it all still comes back to the storytelling aspect, what you were talking about, you know, knowing the media you're approaching. If the work you do is extremely visual, then, you know, maybe Instagram is a good way to go, or if there's a lot of audio, like maybe you want the video, maybe you want to do a really great Vine feed, you know, so I think you kind of have to research the different tools and figure out also what your staff and your resources can handle. But I think what Chris said about not sucking and just picking, you know, one or maybe two platforms and do those really, really well. You don't necessarily have to do all of them.
Another question? All the way in the back of the room?
Hi, I'm Michelle with Texas. We're a civic technology community that offers SMS service and connect people and organizations.
What was the name of the organization? Thank you.
And my question for the panelists is how you see ongoing stories for an organization or company as they grow, and not just, you know, the big announcement when you win the Knight grant or the Series A, but what makes for an interesting story or pitch kind of in between stages?
I don't think it matters how big the organization is, at least from my perspective. If I find something that I think is going to really, you know, affect people or make a difference in the world somehow, if it's a small group, great. I have no problem with that. I think it's really how you pitch it. I think I did something on this organization that was teaching girls how to code. And I thought, wow, I mean, it's not like a huge organization, but I thought, this is amazing. You know, maybe I should go do that. You know, it's like, it really doesn't matter how large you are, but I think it does matter how the person that you're trying to reach feels it's going to make a difference.
And they kind of saw, they identified a problem, and they're solving that problem through their program,
Right.
and they're showing you how they are solving that problem.
What she said.
But I also think, you know, everyone's talked about the power of relationships. It's partly about getting people aware of what you do, because sometimes what will happen is a reporter's working on a story about a subject where knowing that there's somebody out there with a solution, like Techbook, informs that story. It may not be a story entirely about whatever you're doing, but it's a story where you can be a component because the reporter happens to know what you do and how that might fit into that story. You know, maybe they're writing about the digital divide and they want to, you know, incorporate that. So there's a lot of opportunities once you build those relationships and people are aware of you to be able to say, hey, or it's just the reporter says, oh, hey, I need to call that person to put, you know, an element into the story. So that's what, the second piece of the relationship. It's not just about getting that one big feature on you. It's being out there on an ongoing basis where they come back to you for other things.
Just really quickly, I feel like every news organization, every reporter has this magical, 10-point scale to include an organization or a person or a coverage, and like, oh, it's relevant to our audience. Oh, they themselves have a big audience, or they're a large organization, or they're doing a lot of good work, and we haven't written about them ever before or recently, and our competitor hasn't written about them before. And there's all this scale and all these points, and you lose and gain, and at some point you cross this threshold. And every organization is different. And if you are a beat-based organization, right, we're very, very beat-based, and so everything Michelle Lee does, we want to cover. But if you're a more general interest, you know, covering her recently is a bunch of points lower, and it's just this whole sliding scale that is the, you know, foundation of what traditional public relations specialists like Megan have figured out. It's how do you know that threshold you have to cross, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be the big announcement, but big announcement's a 5-pointer on the scale. So if you can assemble your point threshold through being compelling and having not been written about recently, and being interesting and being visual, and, you know, all of these points that hit through this threshold, and boom, that's time. And reporters in the newsroom talk about like, we cover the heck out of her, or like you play this game with fellow reporters of if you cross that threshold, and all of you are somewhere on this threshold through every news organization on the planet. You are somewhere in that threshold. And you can cross any one of them if you work really hard. So you need to decide if you want to put the effort into getting those extra points to get through there. And someone will develop an app that'll be able to tell you that actual point system.
There's an app for that.
And don't be afraid of offering an exclusive to someone. You know, maybe you have been covered a lot for a particular story, but you've got a completely different angle and you've identified the media outlet you think will best tell that story and get it to the right people, journalists like to hear that. Hey, I'm offering this to you first. I haven't told anybody else about this, and I'm bringing it to you because I really think that, this writer will tell the story in the best way. I mean, that can sometimes have a lot of impact.
Just a couple of quick practical things. One is actually writing to that person directly as opposed to sending like a mass email always makes a difference. And the second thing is, don't be discouraged if we don't respond to you. And in fact, people sometimes worry that they'll be bugging me by emailing me constantly. Well, in my case, I don't know if that's true for everybody else, but I get so many emails that I actually welcome the fact that someone says, well, I emailed you last week. I'm just checking to see if you read my email. We are often faced with, again, a tremendous amount of input coming in. And it's very, if I'm out of the office for a couple of hours, I may come back and I may miss that email because it's been buried under the 100 that came, after while I was gone. So it's not that we don't care about you or we're not even interested in you. Most likely, if we didn't respond or often, or sometimes, it's because we didn't actually see it, and it's just the sheer volume. So don't be afraid to reach out to us several times. I mean, there might come a time when I might say, I'm just not interested. But most often, I'm sort of impressed by your persistence, and I might just say, well, gee, let me try this out because you really care, and you really made an effort. Persistence, I think, really pays off.
Tread carefully with persistence, though.
So we can email you 5 times, just not all in a row, or you'll delete them.
Right, exactly. Well, it can't be the
We're not saying
identical.
the exact same thing 5 times.
Right, that's right.
Change the
I saw
subject
him
line a
right
little.
here.
My name is Magda Martinez from the Fletcher Art Memorial Community Arts Group here in Philadelphia. And so I did want to go back. I mean, we chuckled right now, but what is that fine line? Because there is sort of a mixed message I feel I'm getting, which is come and tell me, but don't tell me about your stupid organization all the time. So honestly, and as gatekeepers, because you are, where is that fine line? And honestly, if I'm to engage you and build a relationship, how much of a relationship do you really want? And what is that basis of the relationship? Because I'm understanding from what you're saying that this is about relationship or building relationship. That can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So when you're saying that within the context of your work, what does that mean?
I want to respond, but I want to. So I've worked with a few Knight winners in the room who've done some amazing work. And if Gregory, you can speak on that.
So I wanted to speak to that because of this balance. I never met Miss Morril, but I had the pleasure of being on her show because I knew Chris, right?
Right.
So
I've been on her show too.
I wasn't grandstanding. I was simply saying that, so what is that fine line? It's actually having someone else also assist you in doing that and going out because she knows Chris, she knows he's credible, and so the work we've done with Chris and his company we were able to do it. So I didn't have to do the 5 or 6 emails or anything. I just went in one day and had this great, lovely interview, and we talked about our fundraising effort, and as a result of that, we would get more people to our fundraiser to match the night challenge. So it's the relationship, and also I think it's knowing the other people who know the people, if that makes sense.
I think, and so to cut back, I can see where the mixed message is, but at the end of the day, Chris said it, it's human, right? It's that you would use the same strategy that you would ask your cousin if you're trying to borrow $10. She's like, I need to borrow this $10, but I really don't want to keep asking, so I'm gonna email, I'm gonna send a text, and I'm gonna call, and then at the end, I'm gonna say, I'll back up. And then maybe I'll try again when I'm doing another story, or in another 2 weeks or so, and just really. Pacing and understanding. Maybe it's not, always in the email. It's finding out where they are and going to that event and engaging them in person and saying, I've been trying to reach you, and I haven't been getting through. Maybe it's me. Maybe my emails aren't working. I wanted to make sure that you had this in your hand. And when you're going, know that you have it in your hand, that you have a business card and a way to follow up with them, and that you're also getting their information too.
So you're not crossing the persistent line.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to
Right.
Yeah, we're human, and there might be might be having a bad day, and we'll go, oh, her again. But for the most part, like I said, I find I admire persistence. I mean, I may be alone in this room in that point of view, but I really, if someone really is making an effort, been doing it in a nice way. I mean, I have had instances where people will send me a mean email, in which case I will still say, listen, I appreciate, I didn't get your email, blah, 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 but I would suggest that you reach out to me in a different way. But I think as long as you're cool, you're not being kind of a jerk about it, because if you're a jerk about it, it's going to make it harder to get your, point
I think it depends on what you're
across.
pitching too, because, some stories can actually take months or even a year to actually, come to fruition as a feature story. And so, we have clients that we start sort of planting the seeds 6 months or more in advance, and the first touch is not even really a pitch. It's, I want to get this on your radar. Here's what's coming 6 months from now. But if you're pitching something that's an event that you need to get people to cover, a press conference or something like that, then obviously the time frame is shorter, and maybe you don't follow up every couple of weeks. You follow up every couple of days because you need to make sure they've got that on their calendar. So I think it depends a little bit on what you're pitching too.
Hi, I'm Nathia Lee. I'm with Kulumele, African Dance and Drum Ensemble. So this is really useful for me because we typically engage a PR firm episodically when we do our home season. But I'm interested to hear how you all are, especially you, Ms. Morril, how you're developing these new digital platforms. And I'm wondering whether or not you're open to getting content directly from, because you're like, oh, become your own news outlet. Well, that's right up my alley, except I don't have any staff. But because we can create content. I'm always shooting. I'm a professional photographer, so I shoot the company, I video the company. Are news outlets open to getting content directly from folks like us?
Yeah, well, I think in my case, I welcome that because I have a blog. We're actually integrating all kinds of stuff with the blog and tweeting and Facebooking it. So a lot of times I create my intern here. My lovely intern is, she's documenting this. I'll be blogging about that and tweeting that. But in my blog, yeah, I do use content. It depends, but certainly it's more likely if you are able to get me better content, video content than I'm able to get on my iPhone 5, then I'm willing to look at it and use it. If that works.
I would say that we're definitely open to that, but I would also say, and to go back to what you were speaking about being persistent, maybe sometimes it's not contacting the media because you want them to cover an event, right? Maybe it's contacting them because you have something for them. And if you call and say, I heard that you spoke at the Barnes and I know that you were open to this and I have this great library of content, right? I can create content, but I don't have any distribution. And I wanted to know if I can be of value to you. Right, that immediately grabs my attention because I'm like, I have platforms and I got to figure out content for each one. And I know that she can deliver content. And if it's high quality content, if it's HD, if you know what you're doing, it's edited, then yeah, you become valuable not just to Ms. Morril and to myself, but any news organization that has to fill 30 minutes of TV time or hour program on the radio. Or it's open time. So if you have that content, I think anyone will welcome it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a very specific question from earlier in the discussion. My name's Ian, I'm from the Wilma Theater. Buy me a beer, I'll tell you about it. And, my question is I can never keep up with what is cool as far as social media. I just deleted my MySpace account. I guess what I'm saying is you said that the information is readily out there as far as what demographics are into what. Where is that information?
Pew loves these. Every 6 months, Pew does another trends in social demographics, racial, economic. They love that stuff.
Reagan Communications, huge website that has a ton of information about communications and marketing and a lot of social media stuff. There are a lot of PR news. I mean, my industry, obviously, we're not just media relations anymore. We have to move back and forth between traditional media and social media, so it's all blended together. So PR news doesn't really mean what it used to mean. So that's another one that also has good data. Google.
Well, and also ask the people that you're trying to reach. Where are they? What are they using?
Yeah.
What do they find? Yeah. Was there another hand back here?
Yes, my name is Brandon T. Jones, community activist entrepreneur, represent New Generation Foundation. And one of our initiatives this summer is called the Young Black Entrepreneurs Academy. And we're trying to create a media outlet for them called Hood Politics. And what we're struggling at is like being able to get like some of our youth, like, you know, some kind of press credentials and stuff like that, you know, because they're minors. You know, because we want them to go into certain situations and really capture, you know, the ambiance of certain things that they really can't, you know, get into without certain credentials and different things like that. And being as though we don't have, you know, a lot of money and we can't afford to do certain things, you know, to push that ahead, what are some ideas that, you know, you guys may have, you know, in trying to obtain, you know, some kind of credentials for our young youth to be able to get certain places to interview certain people?
That's a challenging one because press, I know that what I do is I certify press for our events. And for the most part, say like Powerhouse, for instance, you know, that's like one of the biggest concerts of the year. And I'm not likely to, I'm gonna have to be very thoughtful about who I let cover our event because we wanna maximize the number of, you know, just the media benefit. So we're gonna, you know, obviously get MTV there or VH1 or whatever it is, whatever outlet, BET. So, but I am a soft touch, and there have been occasions where I've allowed one young person who's working with a youth media outlet to have a pit pass. So I can't really speak generally because I think it's gonna be very difficult to get traditional press passes because, you know, the city does offer that option for press passes. But I think that for your purposes, oftentimes it's each individual event, and you have to find out whether that event, whoever the promoter is or whoever the organizer is going to allow you to do what you want to do. So again, that's going to be about creating some kind of relationship, having some kind of track record, being able to say, you know, we reached 10,000 young people, 12 to 24, whatever. So you're going to have to, it's going to be a challenge, but it's not impossible. You might start small with some of the smaller events that are out there, some of the locally produced events, and start to build a portfolio. But it's going to, you know, the challenge is you're going to have to convince someone like me that it's worth allowing you to be in that one slot where I have to choose between you and maybe, you know, Philly.com or whatever, or one of the TV stations.
There are probably a lot of arts organizations in this room who would be happy to talk to you in terms of starting, you know, maybe not at the biggest event in town.
Yeah, the climate of news has changed. Even when City Hall, they don't offer press credentials to just anyone now because, you know, you request press credentials and you just go to the event and then it might not, you might not cover it or there's all these different things. So people are being very more considerate of where they're going. And so back what you say, just create a portfolio of the events that you can get in without credentials because they're going to look at your content library. They're going to look at and say, well, you know, if it's hood politics, you know, and they want to cover the Kimmel Center, is that really a fit? You know, so you might also want to think about your name, you know, and if that's a good name in terms of, you know, do you want to get credentials to go everywhere? That might not be the right brand. They might get a little nervous, you know, just being honest. They hear hood politics, you're not going to give them credentials to come into this, you know, everything like that. But at the very basis, you have to create your own library so that when you go there and say, this is my particular audience, and I don't believe when you're producing your event, you might not have any media that covers that. So I'd like to begin a relationship and find out what the protocol is for obtaining credentials for this event. And then find out. It might not be until you have a certain amount of followers, a certain amount of videos in your library, but at least you know, right? And you're working towards that.
I can invite you to come to an event we're having this afternoon. We're doing our Piece on the Street over at Penn's Landing with Big Sean, and we have a bunch of speakers and things like that. So afterwards, I'll give you my contact information.
Thank you very much.
One last question? Well, good, then we don't need, we're right on time.
Thank you, Neil, Chris, Loraine. and Megan for this discussion. I'm sure over lunch, some people will have additional questions for you that may be very specific. And I just want to thank you again for joining us today and being here and being a part of the discussion.
I'm going to invite all of us to give you our Twitter, because that might be a really easy way. So mine is Loraine with one R, Loraine Ballard. That's my Twitter.
At the real TBO Inc. THEREAL TBOINC.
I have two, at Canary Megan, MEGAN, or at Canary Promotion.
At Christopher Wink.
At Neil Budde, it's NEILBUDDE.
Good idea.
At DeFreeze G. Thanks again. The good news is it's time for lunch. The even better news is it's upstairs and outside on the terrace. So you get to tweet, use your phones, and get a little sunlight before the rain comes.